Huracan prices increased with an average of 20% during last year, but there are big differences between the LP 580, 610, EVO and Performante. What's up YouTube and welcome to a new video. Now unlike Porsche GT3s, Huracans don't have a special reputation when it comes to their residuals. However, last year was a special year for car values as values skyrocketed. GT3s are, for example, up by 40%. And that of course raises the question, what happened to Huracan values? Many of you reminded me then also that it's time for an update video on that market. We will have a look at the value development for the LP 580, 610, EVO and Performante. And like I already mentioned, there are some large differences between them. However, the overall result really surprised me. But before we have a look at that, let's first have a look at today's market. Over here we have the current US market with the model year on the horizontal axis and the price on the vertical axis. Each car is displayed by a bubble and the median prices per model year are displayed by the black axis. Now this graph should contain only the standard Huracans. I tried to filter out all those crazy 1000 horsepower examples. As you can see, we have the LP 610, 580, EVO, EVO rear-wheel drive and Performance in this graph. And in total there are 230 cars for sale, but the largest market is with 67 cars to one of the LP 580. And that's perhaps a bit surprising, isn't it? It's indeed the cheapest model of the bunch, but I always thought that Lamborghini drivers prefer to four-wheel driven cars. Speaking about market supply, look also how many Performantes there are for sale. 47. That's quite a lot, I would say. Now if we continue then by looking at the prices, we can also see some large differences. There is a clear price distinction between the Performantes and the EVOs on one side and the LP 610 and 580 on the other side. An LP 610 tends to cost $226,000 and a 580 $230,000. For the EVO and Performantes this is $310,000 and $335,000. So there is, roughly speaking, a gap of $80,000 to $100,000 between the two groups. Now before we move on to the price development over time, I still would like to show you one more thing. This graph over here looks at the market from a model year perspective, but we can also look at it from a mileage perspective. If we just do that real quickly, then we can see something interesting in the Performante market. Usually, the price variation for cars can be explained by the model year, the mileage and the spec level. Depending on the age of the car, the importance of each of these factors vary. So why does this matter here? Well, it turns out that in the Performante market the mileage is a significant price driver. It is more or less 10 times as important for the price than the model year is. You can then also see that it is easy to identify the depreciation per 1000 miles for the Performante. Most of the cars fall neatly on the trend and many even within the confidence interval. And that is just something to keep in the back of your mind if you're in the market for a Performante or own one. But after that small excursion, it's time to have a look at the value development over time. Over here we have now the date on the horizontal axis and the price on the vertical axis. And you can also see that we still have the 580, 610, EVO and Performante. The rear-wheel driven EVO was not yet on the market in April 2020, which is the first data point on the graph. Now when we look at the price changes, we can see from the slope of the lines that there are some significant differences between them. Prices went up most severe in the Performante market. They increased with 24% or a stunning $65,000, and that's really a significant jump. Surprisingly, this is followed by an increase in the 580 market, where prices went up with 21% or $39,900. And this in turn is quite similar to the price increase in the 610 market. Prices over there went up with 19% or $36,000. Now interestingly, the EVO is a bit of an outlier here. Prices increased only by 15% or $40,000. Now in itself this is of course quite amazing, but compared to others it's a bit little. Yet there might be a good reason for it. Let's have a look at the underlying market characteristics. Over here we have now the development of supply, the median mileage and the median model year, all again split by model type. If we first look at the supply graph, we can see that there are quite some differences. Supply decreased for the 580 and the 610, while it increased for the EVO and the Performante. And an increase in supply, that's not something which you see often these days. Typically I've seen a decrease in supply, especially for the cars which are no longer in production. That's then also basically what we can see in the 580 and 610 market, and why I'm a bit surprised to see virtually no change in the Performante market. In any case, this also means that demand must have increased by quite a bit, as prices are up 24%. In the EVO market it makes more sense to have a supply increase. This car is still in production after all. Let's have a look now at the other two graphs. We can see first of all that the median mileage seems to have developed in a similar way in all markets. It increased everywhere. Yet, relatively, the largest increase took place in the EVO market. Over there the median mileage increased from 850 to 2.6 thousand miles. And this might be the key to explaining the low price increase in that market. You can namely see from the model year graph that the EVO is also the newest car of the group. And we all know that these new cars are very sensitive to mileage increases. So a combination of the highest relative mileage increase with a high sensitivity to the mileage might explain the relative low price increase. Now I dug a bit deeper into the data and this hypothesis seems to make sense. But now then, these price increases between 15 and 24% are of course amazing if you happen to own one of these cars. But how high or low are these numbers exactly? They wouldn't seem so good if the rest of the market was up by 40%, right? We therefore need to build some context around them by comparing them to some other cars. Now I don't have data for all Huracan competitors, but let's see how far we can come. And to prevent a messy graph, we will first compare the Huracan to some Porsche models, then to some McLarens, followed by some Ferraris, and finally to the AMG GT R. Before we do any of that though, if you like this video, please support the channel by clicking on the like button down below. Now then, over here we have the 610, the 580 and also the 991 GT3 RS. And you can see that over more or less the same period, the GT3 RS did slightly better than the Huracans. The GT3 RS saw an increase of 24%, which is a bit higher than the 21 and 19% for the Huracans. Yet, it's definitely not a bad score for the Lamborghinis. However, if I add the 991 GT3 to the graph, then we can see that it humiliates the increase in the other markets. Prices over there went up by 42%, and as you can perhaps guess, this is one of the most extreme cases. However, as a result of this, GT3 prices are not too far removed from the Huracans and the GT3 RSs. And that of course means that you can question the value for money what you get over here. In any case, let's move on and insert some Ferraris in the graph. Over here we have now all the Huracans, but also the 488 and the F12. And you can see that the dates for the Ferraris are not exactly the same as for the Huracans, so we need to account for that. But based on the current data, the 488 went up with 10% and the F8 with 8.4%. Now if we correct for the differences in dates by assuming a linear development, we would end up with 14% for the 488 and 11% for the F12. So the Huracans are holding up quite well against the Ferraris. Also, if I add in the 458 and remove the previous two Ferraris, we can see that the 458 performed similar to the Huracans. The 458 went up with 23%, which is the same as the increase what we saw in the GT3 RS market. Now what is also interesting over here is the price level. Most 458s are from 2012, while this is 2015 for the 610 and 2018 for the 580. So in that sense, you are paying quite a lot for that Ferrari badge. And with that, let's move on to the McLarens. Over here I added the 720S and 570Ss to the graph, and I also filtered the data so that each market only contains the coupes. Now we can see that the 720S market saw some large fluctuations due to some idiosyncratic effects. Nevertheless, between May 2020 and May 2021, prices increased by 17%. And if we extrapolate this increase, it would be pretty close to what we can see in the EVO and Performante market. Yet, the increase in the 570S market is a lot lower with 7.4%. Even if we extrapolate this, it doesn't come close to the price increase in the 580 and 610 market. So also here the Huracans show a very good performance. And with that, let's have a look to the last comparison, the one to the AMG GT R. In this graph over here we have now the AMG GT R and the AMG GT R Pro, and they show an increase of respectively 14 and 4.4%. Now the Pro showed quite some volatility due to some changes in the market composition, but even once I correct for that, the increase is less than what it is in the Huracan market. And the same goes for the normal GT R. Prices went up, but compared to other cars only to a limited extent. And with that, let's wrap up and conclude. We saw that Huracan prices increased and that this increase is least severe in the EVO market. Now as we discussed, a possible reason for this is the increase in the mileage combined with a high price sensitivity to this increase. We also compared the price increases in the Huracan market to the Ferrari, Porsche, McLaren and Mercedes-Benz markets. And I think it's fair to conclude that the Huracan did extremely well, as it sits more towards the top end of the price increases. Moreover, it's on par with some icons like the 458 and the GT3 RS, and it outperformed cars like the 570S and AMG GT R. Now on top of this, I also did an aggregate comparison of the price increases, and this revealed that with an average increase of 20%, the Huracan market outperformed many cars which I have analyzed on the channel. And with that we arrive at the end of this video. Now if you enjoy this data-driven way of analyzing car markets, but would have liked to see the analysis for a different car, comment down below for which car you would like to see an analysis. Don't forget then to subscribe and click on the notification bell so you get actually notified when your requested analysis goes live. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you next week for a new video.